call to order this meeting of the Anchorage Assembly and begin with a roll call.
Ms. Drummond?
I am here.
Mr. Trainee? Here. Mr. Trainee is joining us by phone. Mr. Honeman?
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Honored to be here.
Ms. Osiander?
Here.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Mr. Stark?
Here.
Mr. Tromley?
Here.
Mr. Tromley is joining us by phone as well. Ms. Johnston? Here. Mr. Flynn? Happy Valentine's Day, Madam Clerk. And you as well, Assemblymember Flynn.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Birch? Mr. Birch?
Here.
Okay, Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Very good. Mr. Hall, would you lead us in the pledge?
My pleasure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no minutes. Mr. Mayor, anything to report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A few things. I was in Juneau last week, as were several Assembly members, and I'm sure they're going to report on their travels. But we had a number of very good meetings regarding our legislative priorities, and the momentum for the statewide ports and harbors bill looks strong, and as well as some of our other priorities. So obviously we'll keep working hard. And I know yourself and Ms. Johnson also had some very good meetings as well. The Education Summit, the community dialogues continue. We've had 3 so far, been well attended and very good input from the public. We have 2 more this week, one tomorrow evening at the Alaska Native Heritage Center at 5:45, and then the following evening at the Campbell Creek Science Center at the same time. So hoping folks still take the opportunity to sign up. I think there's still space in both of them, and they just go to muni.org/education summit, and they can get on board. This Saturday, as you may well know, is the Legislative Caucus here in these chambers. Most of our legislators will be back, and it's our opportunity to once again meet with them and to discuss our priorities. Also, we've got very good news. We did prevail in the plumbers and pipe fitters lawsuit. We won on all counts, and Mr. Wheeler can give you more details if you like, but generally speaking, the judge ruled that the Assembly does indeed have the final decision. If you do not ratify the arbitrator's decision, the administration's last best offer does go into effect, and so we're confident that would be the outcome. Our crack legal team did a great job in preparing our case, and so we were satisfied with the results. Finally, there's a group that's been working, led by Jim Barnett and the Cook Inlet Historical Society, on early planning for the 100th anniversary of the City of Anchorage, which is in 2015. Well, it seems like a few years off. This is a significant event, and they've already done a great deal of work. And there's a centennial report that's been produced, a preliminary report. I don't know if copies got to Assembly members. Good. And so that's the first step, and we'll clearly be working hard with them and with funding sources to make sure that it really is a significant event. And then finally, Madam Chair, I just want to say a shout-out, a happy Valentine to my lovely wife, Lynette, who sometimes watches. If you're watching, wherever you are, wherever the camera is, happy Valentine's.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any questions for the mayor? Seeing none. Oh, go ahead. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mayor, there was a report that the Porcupine Building is being considered as a potential location for a Housing First facility. That was a bit of a surprise to me and wasn't mentioned when we considered our legislative package. Do you have any further detail you can provide on that?
No, we're not in any negotiations with anyone. It's been generally discussed, by particularly the people at Copper River Seafood. They, of course, wanted the Carlick Manor building for a dormitory for their seafood workers, and they're still, anxious to find other options, and they know that building exists, but we're not in active negotiations with anyone for that kind of use.
Thank you very much for that clarification, sir.
Thank you. I would like to note that there's a new work session scheduled now on the 9th, right before the work session that we have on the MTP. It'll be that cops in the schools discussion that came up with our last joint meeting with the school board. So that one is on for 11 to 12, and we will invite the school board members to participate with that. I'd also like to note for tonight's agenda, the administration has told me they are not interested in pursuing 9B6, so Mr. Hall was going to pull that. There is...
Madam Chair, is that B as in
Bravo,
boy or
Bravo. There's also, I've had some discussion, Mr. Tromley, I think I'll say this since you're not in the room, but you talked about potentially moving the public hearing date on your 9F1 to 3/13?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then additionally, in 11D, old business, my amendments on 11D are not quite complete. I'm going to meet with staff Thursday on that. So that one is going to roll on 11D to the next meeting. Let's see, I had one more. Oh, on the addendum, the coffee cart one will roll till, Mr. Birch, was that 3:15? That's what...
I believe so. We are open to give the legal department an opportunity to take a look at that.
All right, so when I add that in, I'll just say that date instead of the date that's printed? Oh, yes, and Mr. Hall and Mr. Wheeler have asked for one more meeting on the Turnigan issues, and you note there's another packet of stuff here in front of you, that issue. I think that's everything, isn't it, Madam Clerk? Okay.
Madam Chair, just as a point of clarification on that, on the Turnigan issue, there's been some indication there's been a kind of a tightening or restriction on access to documents. Is that the case, or is I guess I'm...
Mr. Hall, do you want to speak to that?
Actually, Mr. Wheeler is probably better prepared to speak to that than I am.
Okay,
And the only reason I bring it up is it relates to whether a week is, or, how much time is necessary to allow the research necessary to, on the background.
We will be ready for this at our next meeting on the 28th. It will be done.
Mr. Wheeler, do you want to add any comment?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Birch, are you talking about access by outside or individuals or property owners? Or
Yeah, I just had some property owners that indicated that there was some stuff that would information that would routinely be available through AWW, bid documents and stuff that's publicly accessible, that they're having some difficulty. It might be just a timing issue, I don't know, but I just didn't want to, we keep kicking this can down the road, and I guess I just want to make sure that we're at a point in time to where everybody's got access to whatever information they need to have regarding project bid documents and such.
Through the chair, Mr. Birch, the code provides that when litigation is filed, the discovery rules in litigation apply, so the attorney representing the plaintiffs can ask for those documents through the court rules and code on discovery. So instead of going directly to the departments, they need to come through us, so we can manage the discovery and make sure everything's produced in accordance with the rules.
Oh, okay, and if I might continue, I think that's where the confusion lies. You're dealing with a whole bunch of different people here, and I don't know if the attorney is representing all of them or one of them or whatever, but the indications are exactly as you've indicated, that once the discovery process starts, then all of a sudden there's a limitation on access to information. I guess I just want to make sure that we've got sufficient time allowed whenever this is heard again, to where everybody's can see there's good access to whatever bid documents happen and so forth.
Thank you. Mr. Drummond, do you want to shed any more light on
Thank
this?
you.
Or?
Yeah, actually, I just need Mr. Wheeler to clarify the position of Assembly members as regards to calls on that particular issue. Mr. Hall and I have been, of course, talking with the property owners for many months now, but now that they're in court, we're continuing to get calls, and some of them have an attorney and some of them do not. And I believe the advice is to direct all their inquiries to Mr. Wheeler's office if they don't have an attorney to represent them. Is that correct?
Mr. Wheeler, can you give us guidance?
Yes, through the chair, I would recommend that course, that all questions be directed to our office.
Okay, thank you. And also, Madam Chair, I have another question on item 9F6, the Turnagain, I know it by a different name, the rezone. It was completed, I believe the work on it was completed by Planning and Zoning just recently, but the public hearing isn't for a couple of more meetings. Is there some reason why that's so far off?
I'm sorry, which number was this?
F6, Frank 6.
Oh, I see.
Does the
In other
rezone
words,
require-
you're wanting it to be before the 13th?
As soon as possible.
Mr. Weaver, I see you in the audience. It came from Planning and Zoning. Is there some reason we need to wait until the 13th on F6? There's no problem with potentially moving it earlier? All right, Ms. Drummond, if you'd like to move it earlier, then I'd suggest that you pull it and we'll change the public hearing date
Great.
through a motion to whatever you think.
Very good. Thank
Works.
you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. With that, let's start with committee reports. Do you want to start, Ms. Drummond?
I don't have a report, but thank you.
Okay. Mr. Traney, do you have any report?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Honeman?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. The regular scheduled meeting for February the Public Safety Committee was canceled because they had operations going on with all departments. And so the next scheduled meeting is Wednesday, March 14th, and I'll try to lock in the location. We're trying to there's a request for dogs off-leash concern, as well as some members of the community want to know about expansion possibility at the animal control facility. Apparently there's some project that has been on the books sometime, and so we're hoping to get that location possibly either at the animal control conference room or the public safety building the building permit center across the road from there. So I'll keep you posted on that. Also, Madam Chair, if I might, the fireworks ordinance proposal, and that should be, I can find the location here on the agenda, under new public hearings, and that'll be under 14E Echo. It's my intent to move to postpone this until the meeting of April 24th. There's been a request, I understand, of the Parks Commission to review and have some input on the ordinance, and also there may be some other members. We'll also bring it up in our April Public Safety Committee meeting so we can have further discussion
Thank you.
on the issue.
Mr. Honeman, do you anticipate getting any legislation to us on the towing issue, or are you
Yes.
still working on that?
And I'll be working with Ms. Tucker, and yes, I did attend the Anchorage Community Police Relations Task Force this past Friday, and they have something that's totally new to me. I hadn't heard before, is along the lines of predatory towing at a mobile home park. We require permits. Apparently some cars were taken that had permits, and so they're pointing fingers as who's responsible, and it was done in the middle of the night, and there's some problems going on there. So we will be working quickly. I'll be working with Ms. Tucker to get something in. Hopefully by next meeting we can at least start the process of getting public hearing in.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The audit contract requires that there be an entrance conference with key finance department personnel, the internal auditor, the clerk on behalf of the audit committee, and every utilities finance manager. So the clerk scheduled a meeting to have that entrance conference, and that meeting will be held on the 23rd of February at 3 o'clock in the Assembly Conference Room, I believe. And the audit committee is invited to attend as well as anybody else. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hall?
Yes, Madam Chair. I've been working on or been assigned to work with a committee for the last year that the Planning Department hired a consultant to look at availability of land and compact housing in the Anchorage Bowl here into the distant future. And that work is done. The consultant will be here on the 20th of March, and I've scheduled a work session so that they can come in and give a report to the Assembly in regards to the information that's been garnered through that process. So 10 to 12 on the 20th of March, we will have a work session so we can receive that information.
There's some confusion on the time. Madam Clerk?
We were able to reschedule it for noon to 1:30.
Okay, noon to 1:30.
Noon to 1:30 then. All right, thank you. Anything else, Mr. Hall?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Starr?
Sure, if I may, Ms. Mahoney, have we seen the preliminary summary of the revenue report for the year end yet on 2011's activities?
Through the chair, yes, I reviewed the report yesterday, and we plan to have it on the Assembly agenda for the next meeting.
So would we be able to see it at committee level prior to the next meeting, do you believe, or what would be your recommendation?
Yes, however, we still have not booked our deferred tax revenues yet, so anything within the next 10 days would likely still not have that number in it. So they would not be final numbers.
Okay. Well, that said, Madam Chair, I'm going to cancel the Budget and Finance Committee meeting for this Thursday. So the 16th, that will be no meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Trombley, do you have anything you want to discuss?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I have two items. One, we will be meeting with the Port Commission tomorrow down at the port. This is the Enterprise Committee from noon to 2 to discuss the port and its needs and their financials. And it's really similar to the meetings that the Enterprise Committee has had with the other boards of the other enterprise units. Also, as the mayor said, the chair and myself and the mayor were in Juneau last week, and the chair and I are board members of the Alaska Municipal League. And my takeaway from last week, twofold. One is I'm very pleased to find that most legislators see port as a statewide issue, and that helps tremendously as we're trying to garner support for it. Secondly, you might have seen in the paper some articles as far as the unfunded liability of our PERS and TERS fund, and this is very important to our state and to Anchorage. Currently, there's a bill that's being discussed in the Senate Finance Committee that actually would change our portion of that unfunded liability if the actual arm of it changed itself, where we could maybe end up paying more than 22% that we're paying at this point. The other aspect is that unfunded liability, the payout is ballooning. Within 3, maybe 4 years, it will be $1 billion bill to the state, not counting our part. And this is at the time that if you look at the revenue forecast for the state, that the revenues will be less than our current state budget. And so this is a very important issue. And that $1 billion that has to be paid. That's an unfunded liability. We're legally responsible for it. And so that funding then comes out of your schools and your roads. So I think we all should be very interested in how the state proceeds from here. And whether there's talk of using some of our excess revenue this year to pay down that unfunded liability. And I think it's something that we should be quite interested in having happen. The other, I noticed today in Compass piece that the writer had tied the unfunded liability to a defined benefit program. And I think we need to be very careful not to tie those two as far as paying down our unfunded liability and how that would relate to starting up a new defined benefit program, because it's apples and oranges. It's the PERS and TERS unfunded liability is a closed program right now. And so we're just responsible for the people that are in it now. And it's very similar to our police and fire retirement fund, which is a closed system. And if anybody was part of that police and fire retirement fund, and if you ask them, would you open up your fund to new enrollees, I don't think you would find anybody that would say yes. Well, this is the same thing with this PERS and TERS unfunded liability. So please don't confuse the issue. The defined benefit, however you feel about it, is an issue on its own. This unfunded liability is a huge issue for the state, and we need to address it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real briefly, we'll have our next edition of AMAT's Policy Committee next Thursday at 1 o'clock in the Mayor's Conference Room.
Yeah. Mr. Birch?
No report.
All right, thank you. With that, there is an addendum and one laid on the table item before us.
Move to incorporate.
Second.
Is there any objection to incorporation? Seeing none, those items are incorporated, and I'll now read them into the record. New 9B7 is AR-50. It's a resolution of the Assembly supporting the Alaska Zoo's funding request to the 27th Alaska Legislature for $15 million to build the Arctic Complex and $150,000 to launch the Alaska Zoo Distance Learning Program. Then for introduction is 9F4. This is AO22. It's an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Municipal Code Chapter 16.60 and related Title 23 building codes, excuse me, to update and conform requirements and permitting applicable to coffee carts and other self-contained mobile food units. And that one, the public hearing, contrary to what's printed, is for March 15th. 13th, is that, did I? I'm sorry. I looked at the 2011 calendar. Thank you. I stand corrected. Also for introduction, 9F5 would be AO23. It's an ordinance waiving or modifying certain provisions of Anchorage Municipal Code, including Title 21 Land Use Planning and Title 15 Environmental Protection, to allow for temporary snow disposal sites due to the large volume of snow and insufficient locations to place that snow, to include a streamlined permitting process and appeal process under Title VII, and allowing for discretionary waivers deemed in the public interest. And that's set for public hearing at our next meeting on the 28th. Also for introduction, 9F6 would be AO24. This is an ordinance amending the zoning map and providing for the rezoning of approximately 0.41 acres from R3, multiple family residential district, to B1A with special limitations, local neighborhood business with special limitations district, from McRae subdivision. It's a re-subdivision of lots 5 and 6 and lot 6A, generally located south of Northern Lights Boulevard and west of Turnagain Street. This is currently set for public hearing on March 13th, and it's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 121. I don't know what dates you want, so we'll wait until we get
Madam
a
Chair,
motion.
actually, Mr. Wheeler just advised me that because this is a rezone, Mr. Weaver had, there's a notice issue, and I think it has to remain on the 13th. So.
That's correct, Madam Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it does require a mailed notice, so we do need to keep it the current date on the 13th.
And who is getting that notice?
Property owners within 500-foot periphery.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So then I will leave it as read with public hearing on the 13th.
Thank you.
All right. The incorporated addendum laid on the table is before you with the consent agenda.
Second.
Is there any objection to having that before? Well, I don't need to ask that now. First, I need to poll. Mr. Birch, I'm going to start with you and see if there's any items that you would like to pull off the consent agenda.
No items, Madam Chair. I think we opted not to read the one.
Yeah, we did. Mr. Flynn?
Do you need me to pull 9 Bravo 6, or somebody else got that?
No, we decided, you can if you want,
Okay,
sir.
I'll pull that one.
All right, thank you. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I would like to, I'm sorry, I just saw this again.
Patrick got that, yeah. Do you want me to come?
9D3,
Bravo 3.
D as in dog.
Oh, Delta 3, all right. Delta 3, D3. Anything else, Ms. Johnson?
No, thank you.
Mr. Trombley, is there anything you'd like to pull?
No, Madam Chair.
Mr. Starr?
No items.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, Madam Chair, 9D5,
That's Delta 5.
Delta 5, and 9F1.
And F1. All right. Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I need to pull it, but I would like to be added as a co-sponsor with Mr. Trainee on 9B7, the zoo resolution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. I think, yeah, Mr. Hodeman?
Yes, Madam Chair, for discussion, 9 Bravo 1, 9 Bravo 2,
Wait, just a sec. Okay. Bravo 1 and Bravo 2,
and I'd like to have a question on 9 Echo 1. It's pulling 9 Echo 1.
and Echo, yeah, that was already, oh, no, it wasn't. Here it is, and Echo 1. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Hodeman?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Mr. Trainee?
Madam Chair, could we ask if Paul could take a look at items 94 and 95? Just I'm seeing a lot of liquor licenses come up that we're catching them serving kids under 21. I think maybe our public safety committee needs to have a talk with the industry to see what the problem is. I don't want to pull it. It's just that there's a lot of them out there.
Okay, I think, I had a conversation with Mr. Honeman before the meeting, and I thought that that's why he was pulling B1 and B2. But you're saying...
Maybe, but there's more in D4 and 5. Just I think we need to have the Public Safety Committee talk to the owners to figure out what the problem is, because there's a manifest problem of serving under 21s.
Okay, did you want to pull Delta 4, sir?
No, I don't, ma'am. Just,
Okay.
just look at it if you would.
All right, so you want a general conversation about that. Okay, Mr. Honeman's nodding his head, sir. All right. Ms. Drummond?
Nothing, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, I'll go through it and see if we've got it. Bravo 1, Bravo 2, Bravo 6, Delta 3, Delta 5, E1, F1. And I think that's it. All right. Please vote on the remainder of the consent agenda. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
That's approved unanimously. Thank you very much. The first item before us then is 9B1. This is AR 43. It's a resolution of the Assembly stating its protest regarding a renewal of a beverage dispensary license for 1456 for Eagle River Bowl, DBA The Whaler Bar and Grill, located at 171 Muldoon Road.
Move to approve as presented with protest.
That item is before us. Do you want to speak to it, Mr. Honeman?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. And the next item, also 9 Bravo 2, can be discussed, summarized the same way as Mr. Trainee actually brought my attention to particularly the Whaler Bar with, if you notice, violations. They had 3, 4, 5 violations within a year, and these violations were from 2009 and all the way through about mid-2010, in which at that time they changed management. So there's a protest already until this business pays its taxes, and in which I guess I understand through the clerk's office that once paid, then the protest would be lifted. I don't intend for the discussion tonight. I believe we should approve the renewal based on the violations because they're dated and they have new management. But I just rest assured this body that I'll be discussing with the owners that we'd like to make sure they've got good management practices to address the circumstances.
Thank you very much.
And that's on both. It's the same owner, just so you know, from both 9B1 and 9B2.
Very good. Mr. Starr?
Well, I appreciate that. 9B2 Homestead Bar is attached to a bowling alley. It's a fairly common public area, and the entrances perhaps have some challenges with how do you get in the place, especially when it's dark and cold. So you'll notice on the violation here, it's not a service of underage. It was basically they found somebody that was not of age on the premise. And so, it's probably one of our largest bars in Eagle River, and I'm not going to plug one way or the other, but just understand what we're talking to the gentleman about. It's not underage service necessarily. It's just somebody wandered into that site probably and was not of age. So just for clarification on that. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about on B2?
No, just that 9B2, the owners of the Eagle River Bowl and the bar behind it decided it's the same owners as the Whaler on 9B1. And so I just want to make sure they have management and the steps that they're to be successful, not to have continuing ongoing practice. I mean, 5 violations in a year.
No question. I guess, again, the Eagle River group seems to be a little bit different. We have brawls from time to time for some folks from out of state. But, Madam Chair, would also be opportunity to talk about 9B2 for another matter?
Go ahead.
Well, I guess I'd like to talk to the Chief of Police briefly.
I'm sorry. Could you hold a minute until we vote on B1?
Oh, okay.
Would you mind?
Fine.
All right. Is there anybody else who'd like to say anything on B1? Seeing no one, please vote on B1. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
And that one passes unanimously. B2 is before us. This is AR 44. It's a resolution stating a protest regarding a renewal of a beverage dispensary liquor license number 2895 for Eagle River Bowl, LLC DBA Homestead Lounge and Sourdough Bowl, located at 12130 Regency Drive, and authorizing the clerk to take certain action.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Starr.
Well, I don't have any protest necessarily, but I did want to talk to the chief about his practice on the drunken public observations that seem to be cropping up with your officers. I got a couple emails, not necessarily relating to this one, but can you tell me how you interpret somebody that's displaying drunken public? I guess I wouldn't know how you would do that. They don't stagger when they walk, or are they belligerent, or what are you looking for on a premise? And
are you talking about the enforcement we've been doing in the downtown bars?
Yeah, this Homestead bar has one attached to it on its record. I wanted to bring it up in terms of that.
Regarding Homestead, I asked the CAP team if they had been working in Homestead or the previous bar and to look at the record, and what they told me was that wasn't us, that was the ABC board. So it wasn't APD that made the cases you folks have been referring to, as far as I can tell.
Well, that said, I guess drunk in a bar concept, are your officers undercover when they're doing that, or is there a police presence in uniform generally when you're taking that policy stance?
We've done it both ways in the past. We mix and match there. Sometimes we send uniforms in and wander around and talk to folks, and if we see a violation, we'll address it in uniform. Sometimes we put together a short detail, and that may be an undercover detail. We may do it on our own, or we may do it in conjunction with the ABC board investigators. And we've been doing that for 30 years that I know of.
Your policy statement on that, is that to eliminate the brawls, or is it to catch them drinking and driving when they leave the bar? What's the focus here? Because I like to respond back to industry on just what your force is after here in terms of that. It's a recreational place, over imbibing. I have some younger kids myself, and I do know they have accountability networks, at least on the college-age kids, but some of the others, what are you after, I guess, is the point.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there right now, which I hope to clarify in a Compass piece, which may be published any day. I think our reasons over the years have varied. I can tell you what our reasons are now. But in general, in the past, particularly when 4th Avenue was a lot more rambunctious than it used to be, it would be more along the lines of the fights and unruliness and so forth. There still is a bit of that, particularly at Bar Break these days. But right now, what we're responding to are reports from the field that some bars are getting out of hand, and we're working very hard on our 0 for 12 program. We're down to 3 last year, 3 alcohol-related fatalities. We're shooting for 0 alcohol-related fatalities this year. So a piece of that is discouraging over-service. Also, we've concentrated on the fact that downtown Anchorage has a high incident of sexual assault, and academic studies and our own anecdotal information suggests that alcohol plays a big part in those sexual assaults, and a lot of them are downtown. So downtown alcohol, downtown is part of that. We're trying to suppress those numbers. That isn't the only way to do it, obviously, but it's a piece of our effort. We know that most of the bars downtown are doing a great job in terms of not over-serving their folks. But we also know we've got some trouble spots, and so we did a detail which has now moved on to other things.
Is there anything the Assembly can do? I mean, obviously we flagged some of those, and Paul's committee brings the, is there a strengthening that you would see from the Assembly perspective on what you would want as a police chief?
I don't think we need to strengthen the existing situation, but there are many movements afoot right now, or I should say movements afoot in a variety of forums to weaken the liquor enforcement efforts in the state, and I would ask for your support in keeping the status quo and allowing us to react when we see that there are problems developing. It's not something we do all the time. It's like a number of, like, for instance, prostitution or after-hours gambling facilities. We will go in sometimes when they get out of hand, do a small operation, then back out again. And we'd like to be able to apply that response as circumstances dictate.
Yeah, there's that fine line between recreating and drinking too much, and I'm reminded of the Ron White skit, of course, where he proclaims he didn't want to be drunk in public, he wanted to be drunk in a bar. And so, I guess that's the point there is that, the tourism message and some of those folks from out of state. So I appreciate the answer.
What people need to remember is we're not talking about the same level of intoxication as people think of with a DWI.
I heard that.
We are talking way drunk.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate your time, Chief.
Mr. Honeman.
Chief, while you're here, thank you. Two things, Madam Chair. On Whaler, did you say that, I know that it was, I looked at the reports and it was ABC board enforcement, but did you show any issues, concerns when researching the Whaler bar on any problems or anything in the last year?
This is anecdotal, but what I heard was that we had gotten our CAP team had gotten some phone calls or complaints from the public suggesting that we may want to pay attention to one or both of those. I don't think we've taken it up yet, but we took it under advisement, and maybe something we do in the future.
Okay.
But my impression is none of the cases you're referring to were our cases.
And then one last thing, just a response to Mr. Starr as well as to the body. We do have conversations. The Public Safety Committee actually brings in members of Anchorage Char, attends almost regularly, and you're welcome to stop in, and it's probably my fault for not updating. Just had recently a conversation that I believe the Rum Runners, management or owners of Rum Runners are actually pondering perhaps the request of the vault downstairs. You remember they pulled that here last year, and they've taken care of all the problems, addressed, or at least that's what I'm hearing. And they're very proactive in trying to figure out steps to be a better service and a better community member down there. So, but I will say, literally, in my work on the evenings and weekends, not as much recently, but working in community patrol downtown, I remember a lady walking out literally in the middle of the street and laying out like a snow angel in the middle of the 4th Avenue. And we're talking that drunk. So,
Thank you very much. Please vote on 9B2. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
That passes unanimously. We are now at 9B6, AR 48, resolution appropriating $34,258 of municipal cash pool earnings in the Finance Department, Public Finance and Investment Fund to the Public Finance Investment Fund 191 in the Finance Department for management and custodial expenses of the municipal cash pool.
No motion, Madam Chair.
Do we need to move to postpone indefinitely? Okay. All right. Moving on. The next item before us is 9 Delta 3, This is AM 105. It's the 2012 Support Services for the Federation of Community Councils, $80,000.
Move to approve.
Go ahead, Ms. Johnston.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Butler, that I didn't have this question to you before the meeting, but somebody had sent in a concern today. And my question is, how much of the Federation Community Council time is spent on supporting other community councils, and how much of it is spent on time creating resolutions to issues on your own? Does the Federation of Community Councils ever weigh in on planning and zoning issues or as I say, municipal issues as a body?
You could start with identifying yourself. Thank you.
Yes, Mark Butler. I'm staff at the Community Council Center for the last 4 years. To the chair, to Ms. Johnston, the Federation of Community Council does not weigh in on policy issues in regard to any body whatsoever, only procedural questions. Just recently, the Community Council, the FCC, weighed in on a question about planning and zoning. They thought, members of the delegates to the FCC thought that the time period for viewing documents that were going to be considered by the planning and zoning was very short, only 4 days, and so they asked planning and zoning to extend the public hearing on that. But they do not weigh in as far as for this park, against this park, any issues of the body. It's not their job.
Or any Title 21. It's just more procedural.
Yes, process only.
Great, thank
Individual
you.
councils do, of course, though.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
That item passes unanimously. The next item before us is 9 Delta 5. Oh, dear. This is, I don't know, Madam Clerk, can I waive reading? This is many, many, many liquor license renewals. We'll just leave it at that.
Move to approve.
Second.
Madam Chair, I pull this in order to give the mayor a chance to declare a conflict of interest on this one.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Obviously, I don't vote on this, but just for disclosure purposes, I'm a partial owner in one of the establishments that's in 95 McKinley's Pub.
All right, and I think it's a pretty clear conflict, so the mayor will not be making comment on this. Mr. Starr?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have my daughter works at Hot Quarter Grill, which is also listed on here, and she's not a dependent per se of mine, doesn't live at the house, but I still support her in her education, and she works there from time to time.
Is this the bulk of her income?
No.
Is it a substantial enough part of her income that it will weigh on your decision?
No, I think the only thing that I'd like to advise the body on is that I dine there from time to time, and occasionally the owners take liberty to talk about city business. They have not specifically addressed me about this topic, although they also own Table 6 in town, and I did talk with them early on in the process about the Table 6 effort that they put in place. So just full disclosure in that relationship, they're a prominent group in Eagle River, as you know, and so so far I've been able to limit it that way, but my daughter's 22 and respects my position in that, but there's just disclosure in that. I don't think she misuses her relationship with me in concert with the owner. So
okay. Well, this is a small enough town, so I think we talk to people regularly, and I'm going to declare that you do not have a conflict in this matter.
That'd be fine. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, I'm just curious if anyone else is disturbed that Club Elixir is renaming itself the Man Cave. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Trombley.
The question actually, I do have that one about the Man Cave. It appears that they're operating under a new name, but did not go through the proper channels. if we approve this, can we actually approve this even though they're operating under an improper name?
Madam Clerk?
Because we're approving the man cave, but
Amanda, can you help?
page 207.
Through the chair, Amanda Moser, licensing clerk. They've filed paperwork to do a name change. So they are now the Man Cave and no longer Club Elixir.
Did you hear that, Mr. Trombley?
Yes, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Thanks. That's all.
And that was my finding too, I'm sorry, but didn't put that in.
All right. Is there any further discussion on these liquor license renewals? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Those pass unanimously, and noting for the record that the mayor has left the room. All right. The next item before us is 9E1. This is an informational report on the preliminary 2011 year-end expenditures.
Move to approve. Or accept. Move to accept.
Go ahead, Mr. Honeman.
Yes, and this is the administration, perhaps Ms. Mahoney or Ms. Frasca. On the printout spreadsheet, and I realize Mr. Starr had asked earlier, but the budget to actuals in 2011, the amount over under budget, am I to understand, what date does this bring us to the $16,902,000 in surplus?
Through the chair, this report was ran as of February 2nd, and I would like to point out that we have continued to make expense accruals since that point in time, and so the numbers have changed.
And what, you know, is it the 14-month report, is that where you're addressing more towards the end of the month?
And we're continuing to close the books here for another couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I had asked this by email, and I'm not sure who in the administration puts the nonprofit report together, but I noticed that you both had, that the report had Eagle River and Girdwood in it. And just for clarification, are these the nonprofits that their boards vote on and actually are paid for out of their own funds that they tax themselves?
I would need to check on that and get back with you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Starr?
There really isn't anything more than an observation. It's been my intention to sort of have a meeting as it relates to the overall financials as they come in together. That was my question earlier about the revenue report as well. So I may even suggest a sort of a committee of the whole meeting as we get farther down the road for that. There's a delay between these sort of final summaries as the CFO sees them and the CAPR. And so you I think, have a valid point, Mr. Honeman, trying to come up with where we actually settle out, and a little bit more work than trying to jam it all in at first quarter budget review. So that'd be my intention as soon as the administration feels comfortable that they've settled enough and we get the revenue summaries to bring a meeting together. Thank you.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the administration, I understand that this is a work in progress. And this document that we have in hand today is as of February 2nd, and as of February 2nd, the amount under budget is $16.9 million. So I guess my question is, as of today, February 14th, what is that number? Because I know that we're getting pretty close to the bottom line. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Through the chair, what I did today was I ran the numbers for the 5 major funds and started to do analysis on that because those are the numbers that are most impactful in regard to fund balance. And as of today, we are positive $9 million in regard to expenses and revenues. Please keep in mind that this is a very preliminary number.
Anything else, Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Nope, that's it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you. Seeing no one else in queue, please vote on accepting this report. Mr. Trainee?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Trombley? Mr. Trombley, are you there?
Yes.
Do you are you in favor of accepting this report?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. That is accepted unanimously.
Madam Chair, just a point of personal
Go ahead.
liberty here. I didn't do a very good job of acknowledging your efforts in putting the reports together, and so I know we just passed that item, but, you know, in reflection, I just traveled for 2 weeks, and I'll tell you, other city councils and other communities are dealing with significant shortfalls, and so I would like, I'm happy that the conversation was short tonight and we didn't have that, but it's not to oversight your fiscal diligence, and again, as we have a chance to meet at committee, we'll summarize perhaps the acknowledgement there of all the department heads, because it's quite the thing, and I'm quite pleased to not have to deal with budget deficits and major hand-wringing of shortfalls. So my kudos if nobody else acknowledges that. Thank you.
I think we all do. Thank you very much. Excellent work. All right, the next item before us is 9F1. This is AO19. It's an ordinance amending Municipal Code Section 4.40.030 and 23.10.103.4 to provide for 3-member building board hearing panels, refundable filing deposits, discretionary de novo review of hearing panel decisions by the Board of Building Examiners and Appeals, and to expand the authority and jurisdiction of the building board to allow the building board to grant variances from strict application of the building code. Public hearing 228.
Madam Chair, I pull this to change that public hearing date to March the 13th.
We still have to move to introduce.
Move to introduce.
Second.
I need a third. All right. So who was the third? Mr. Birch, thank you. Now, you want to make your motion to amend?
I want to make a motion to amend to the public hearing date of March 13th, meeting of March 13th.
All right. I see you plugged in. Mr. Starr was the second on that. All right. With that, is there any objection to that public hearing date? 3/13. Is that, did I get that right? Again, 13 or 15? I have to double check now. 13th is correct. Very good. All right. Seeing no objection, that's the new public hearing on that. Thank you. All right. We are now done with our consent agenda. We are now at 11, old business.
Madam Chair? I think we kind of glossed over it, but I wasn't sure if any of the folks that were appointed, did we appointed just a few folks to the building examiner.
Is there anyone in the room who was just appointed to a board or commission? If so, we'd like to meet you. Appears not, Mr. Birch.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are now back to 11, and both on 11A, the public hearing was closed and the action was carried over, but there is no motion pending. This is AR 321. It's a resolution confirming and levying assessments for the sanitary sewer lateral special improvements within Turnagain Heights Sanitary Sewer Lateral Improvement District 1415, setting date of payment and providing penalties and interest in the event of delinquency.
Madam Chair, I would move to postpone action on this item until our meeting of February 28th.
Second.
Is there any objection to that from anyone? Seeing no objection, then that one is postponed till our next meeting. The next item before us is 11B. This is AR 322. It's
Waive reading.
Basically, this is for Turnagain Heights Water Improvement District 1416.
Same motion, Madam Chair.
The motion. All right. The motion is to go to the next meeting on this. Is there any objection to doing that? Hearing and seeing none, that matter is also continued to our next meeting. Last one of the trio is 11C 323. This is a resolution
Waive
confirming, again, for its special assessment district IPO3 street improvements.
Madam Chair, move to postpone to the 28th.
All right. And
Second.
There's a second. Is there any objection to continuing this to our next meeting, postponing it? Seeing no objection, that is also continued to our next meeting. The next item before us is 11D. This is AO7. It's an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 21.08.060 and Municipal Code of Regulations, Section 21.90.03, to authorize the appropriate municipal departments and officials to clarify technical discrepancies.
Madam Chair, I'd move to postpone that to the meeting of February 28th.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any objection to continuing that to our next meeting also? Seeing no objection, that is also continued. Thank you very much. We are now at new public hearings, and it is 6 o'clock, so we're okay. Just in time. Right. All right. The first item before us is 14A. This is AO13. It's an ordinance authorizing and providing for the issuance of not to exceed $120 million in aggregate principal amount of tax anticipation notes, fixing certain details of said notes, providing for the form and manner of sale of said notes, pledging the receipts from ad valorem property taxes to be collected during the year 2012 in the full faith and credit of the payment thereof, and delegating certain matters to the Chief Fiscal Officer in connection with the sale and placement of these notes, accompanied by AM 74. Would anyone like to speak to us on this? Please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
And Mr. Flynn is excused because he's out of the room. Oh, Mr. Flynn is returned and voted yes. So that passes unanimously. Next item before us is 14B. This is AO15. It's an ordinance providing for, authorizing, and approving the issuance of subordinate lien
Waive reading.
electric revenue notes for $300 million. Would anybody like to speak to this matter? Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move approval.
Discussion? Seeing none, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Johnston, you were just a little too slow for me, but go ahead.
It's rather repetitive, but I did ask our CFO what the savings were with this, and I think it'd be worthwhile, in case you didn't read, to for our CFO to mention the savings.
Yes, as a result of changing our financing instrument with some of our capital projects at ML&P by using a commercial paper versus issuing a revenue bond, we anticipate an annual savings beginning in 2012 of $6.4 million in interest expense.
Bravo. Excellent news. Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else? I've closed the screen, so if you, there appears to be no one else who'd like to speak, so please vote. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
That passes unanimously. We're now at 14C. This is AO14. It's an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 16.120.020 to increase the temperature threshold for the cold weather plan for homeless persons from 32 degrees to 45 degrees, accompanied by AM 75. Anybody like to speak to this?
Good evening. My name is Susie Pearson. I'm the Executive Director for Abused Women's Aid in Crisis, and we've been a partner of the Cold Weather Program from its inception. AWAKE is one of the few 24-hour crisis lines in our community, and we have had the privilege of being the front line of defense for this program. 211, when you call 211, they automatically refer you to the AWAKE's crisis line, which is 2720100. And AWAKE receives all the information about which churches have safe haven available, and then we get people to those churches, those families that are in need. And I just wanted to let you know that as a collaborative partner in this program, that we support the increase in the temperature to 45 degrees. Any questions?
There appear to be none, but on behalf of the Assembly, thank you for what your organization does.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Assembly members.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, could you vote, please? Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston is out of the room, and so this passes 10-0. And belatedly, Ms. Johnston adds her approval. Thank you, to make it unanimous. The next item before us is 14D, AO16. It's an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code section.
Way of reading.
This is to revise the penalty for driving without proof of insurance or other security or failure to present such proof. Traffic fees and fines. Anybody like to speak to this matter? Please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move this ordinance to committee. We've had some concerns from a couple folks in the public about this ordinance, and I really think that it warrants further discussion at the Public Safety Committee meeting level, and I would hope that my colleagues agree with me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so there's a motion to move it to committee. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Madam Chair.
All right. Discussion on the motion. Anything anybody wants to say about that? Mr. Wheeler.
Madam Chair.
Just a second, Mr. Trombley. I'll put you in line. Mr. Wheeler's first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the Assembly's information, the primary motivation behind getting this in front of you was that the court system notified us that until we resolve these issues, they were not going to be able to update their system, and the court will not be taking our cases that fall into the categories described herein.
Ouch. Okay, Mr. Trombley, you're next.
My question is just to Ms. Gray Jackson. What are the issues that you'd like to be discussed in Public Safety Committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to you, Mr. Trombley, I had some discussion with a constituent who had concerns about folks who can't afford insurance, and her concerns were in depth, and I don't wish to take the time at this meeting right now to do that, because that's what committee meetings are for. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Starr.
Yeah, I won't be supporting the referral to committee on this one. I think it's fairly pragmatic, and the policy of having insurance has pretty well been established, so I'm going to speak against that. I did have a general comment on the topic, which I'll bring back after we vote.
Mr. Birch?
I'll be speaking against postponement as well. It's a housekeeping item that we've had ample opportunity to address any questions that have come up in the last week or two. Thank you.
Anyone else on the topic of refer to committee? Ms. Drummond?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious what the rush is to pass it and why it can't go to committee, since we appear to be having fewer and fewer work sessions on any issues that are coming before this body. Having to take them up in committee doesn't help things get done. So, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wheeler, do you want to talk more about impact to respond to Ms. Drummond's question, or?
Through the chair, I'm not sure that I can add much more other than to say that until the court system enters our municipal ordinances and resolves the conflicts, it's not going to take our cases. So that was the purpose in getting this in front of you, so that we could resolve that issue and make sure that the will of the Assembly and the mayor expressed through these codes was met by enforcing these provisions.
Ms. Drummond, if you want a work session on any topic, just let me know. I've been trying to be responsive.
Actually, I'd like to make a comment on this. Is our issue with the courts, does it have anything to do with the fact that the state does not require proof of insurance when you register your car?
Mr. Wheeler?
Through the chair, Ms. Drummond, there's not necessarily a direct correlation between the insurance and registering your car, but you certainly have to have insurance when you're driving the vehicle. So both state and local law have provisions regarding proof of insurance, and the idea is to make sure that our codes meet the requirement to be consistent with state Title 28 and make sure that the court system will enforce our codes when we present the cases to them.
Anything else, Ms. Drummond?
That's it. Thank you.
And Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the C, and I'm curious, it sounds like the court is currently not taking our citations because our code isn't consistent. Does that mean we're holding off on sending those cases to the court and we anticipate doing so? Or does that mean that the citations that are being written are basically being expunged?
Through the chair, Mr. Flynn, my understanding is that the court system has actually dismissed the cases. I don't think expunge is the right term in the legal word, and then I believe in our prosecution division, we're not going to press those cases until we get this resolved, because the court's just going to dismiss them when we waste everybody's time.
So is the idea that is the reason that we have consistent revenues this year through FY16 because we're holding on to those until this is done, or is it because we just didn't pay attention to the fact that some of these were dismissed and therefore this year's numbers should be depressed? I don't know if you're the right person to answer that, Mr. Wheeler. I'm sorry.
Through the chair, Mr. Flynn, I don't know how to answer it, so I'm apparently not the right person to ask. Can you?
Well, I guess I'm not terribly inclined to support postponing this, but if it doesn't affect the revenue associated with it, then maybe I don't mind. And it appears that maybe it doesn't affect it because we've had 6 weeks of the year, and according to this, there's no effect on the revenue.
Mr. Wynn, we're having trouble hearing you. If you could
I'm sorry. I'll restate the comment, which is I'm not necessarily inclined to postpone this, but because I'm worried about the revenue. However, if this indicates, the C indicates that there's no effect on revenue, even though we've missed 6 weeks of the year, which I just need to know if it matters. If we postpone this, do we lose the revenue, or does it somehow get caught up later in the game?
Mr. Mayor or Mr. Vacalis, can you talk about the revenue side on this?
My understanding is this, that if we arrest under municipal code, then basically the bulk of the revenues comes to the city. If we arrest under the state code, the bulk of the revenue, in fact, all the revenue, goes to the state. So it is a part of our revenue. It was budgeted as part of our revenue, and so as a result of that, it's a revenue shortfall, or will be, if we don't expedite and get this fixed. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn, you still have the floor.
Okay, I guess the C is just not accurate then, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Mr. Honeman.
No, I think it's mostly been asked and answered. I wasn't sure which section of the code. I clearly understand the difference between writing under state code, statutes, or city code. Apparently, we've been writing under state statutes in the interim until the city code gets changed. Is that right, Mr. Wheeler?
Yes, sir, to some degree that is correct.
Okay, Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My intent is by no means to hold up the work that we do on behalf of the public. My only intent is, because I was approached by 2 members of the public who said that they would be here this evening to testify, except they like celebrating Valentine's Day, and I said that I would do what I could. With that said, Madam Chair, we don't have to, I'm okay with not bringing it before the Public Safety Committee meeting, but I would like to see it at least postponed until the next meeting to give these folks in the public who want to be heard an opportunity to be heard. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, at this point, the motion before us is to refer to committee. Mr. Hall?
Yes, really a question to Mr. Wheeler. In order to be in compliance with the state statute, not have an issue with this, do we really have a lot of options in what we can do in regards to this language?
Through the chair, Mr. Hall, no. I mean, if we don't make these changes, then our only recourse is to cite under state law. And as Mr. Vacalis indicated, all that revenue goes to the state. So we lose the revenue that supports the expenditures.
Thank you.
All right. Please vote on the motion to refer to committee. Mr. Trombley?
No.
Mr. Trainee?
No.
That motion failed 3-8.
Madam Chair?
Going back to you, Ms. Gray-Jackson.
I'd like to move to postpone action on this until the meeting of February 28th.
Don't you mean continue the public hearing?
Thank you, Ms. Drummond. Move to continue the public hearing.
Second.
All right, just a minute. You want to reopen the public hearing then? If that,
Yes,
is that
Madam,
your intent?
that is my intent, Madam Chair. Thank
All
you.
right, there's a motion to reopen the public hearing, and it was seconded. Is there discussion on reopening the public hearing? Mr. Starr.
To the maker of the motion, what do you expect to hear from the public on what topic, I guess? Is it the amount of the fees or the fact that we require proof of insurance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Starr, if I knew all the details, I would get up and go to the podium and testify on their behalf, but I don't. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, in that regard, I don't have any guidance on just what's wrong with what we're trying to do tonight, and I say we urge it along. If the maker of the motion has something else that she wants to bring forth, there's nothing prohibiting her from doing it later, so I urge approval tonight of this, and no on the delay.
Seeing no one else in queue, please vote on reopening the public hearing and continuing it to our next meeting. Mr. Trombley?
No.
Mr. Trainee?
No.
Is Mr. Honeman is out of the room, so, oh, he is? You were hiding back there.
Sorry.
I couldn't see you. I straightened my head. All right. The motion to reopen the public hearing failed, 3-8. We're back to the main motion. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote on the main motion. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
And that motion passes 10-1. All right. The next item before us is 14E. This is AO17. It's an ordinance of the Assembly amending Municipal Code Section 8.75.040.
Waive reading.
This is about fireworks, and the sponsor has already said he intends to continue this until the end of April. But you're certainly free to speak to this tonight if you'd like to. You could just begin by stating and spelling your name for the record.
My name is Linda Harter, Harter.
Thank you.
I'm opposed to the city spending 5 more minutes on this issue. You've heard from dozens of people that they're opposed to fireworks. I think kicking it over and having the Parks and Recreation Department involved is a waste of time and city resources, and I'd really like to have somebody from the city speak for the city about that. The Parks and Recreation already has a procedure for special events. They have a dandy pamphlet they give to people if you want to have special events involving fireworks. It weighs the responsibility of the city to protect its property as well as giving a semblance of safety to the public. I think the Parks and Rec Director would behoove him to cling to that policy, which has been thought out and money was paid for it. And I think that's the conclusion that he'll eventually come to. We will nevertheless be back. However many times you put this on, we will persist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on this matter? Hearing and seeing no one, Mr. Honeman, do you want me to close the public hearing or continue?
I believe we should continue for the meeting, a postponement of meeting of April 24th, I believe it is, on the calendar.
All right. Then, could we have a second for that? Oh, I'm sorry. Could you touch your screen, Ms. Gray-Jackson? Thank you. All right. Right now, the motion is to continue this public hearing to the meeting of April 22nd. Is that what you said, sir?
April 24th is what I'm seeing on the calendar. If
April
that's correct.
24th. All right. Is there objection to that?
Yes.
Mr. Birch? All right. We'll put it on the board then. Please vote on the matter of continuing to the 24th of April. Mr. Trombley?
Clarification, Madam Chair. Voting yes would be to approve it to the 28th of April, correct? Or
Yes, we're only voting on continuing it or not continuing it.
Okay. Yes. Vote yes to continue.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Okay, that was approved 8-3. So, the next item before us is 14F. This is A018. It's an ordinance of the Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code subsection 12.07.0110, tax levy on motor vehicle registration to provide for a limited refund program and providing for retroactive application. And I was remiss in saying that there was a C that was laid on the table tonight. Okay, yeah. Would you like to speak to this matter? Please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed. And approved. Second. All right, that matter is before us. Mr. Oatman, do you want to speak to it?
I think the ordinance and the description in the ordinance and the whereases explain my position pretty well on this issue. There was a summary of economic effects that finally came in late this afternoon. I hope you've all had a chance to take a look at it. I'm pretty sure that the intent of the Assembly was to have the IM tests go away long before this year. And those folks who are registering their cars in January and February of this year are being hit with a double whammy of taxes and fees, and it's costing a minimum of $240 to register your car when it shouldn't cost more than about $170. That's for an 8-year-old car. If your car is newer than that, it's going to cost you considerably more because of the motor vehicle registration tax that came into being on January 1st of this year. So I would urge a yes vote, and I believe that the administration is overestimating the number of people who will actually come in and ask for a refund or a credit. I also think there's some simpler ways to set it up, but I think the first step is that this body has to agree that our taxpayers and voters and citizens and residents who are registering their cars are being unfairly treated in the first 2 months of this year due to no fault of anybody's except the timing of the EPA in telling us when the IM test could go away. Thank you.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I signed on to this ordinance with Ms. Drummond because I agree with her 100%. The INM fee and this increase in the vehicle registration tax is a double whammy. You know, we've heard from folks in the community about financial hardships and so forth, and I think that this is a small way to show our citizens within this community that we understand the hardship, and I would urge my colleagues to vote for this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Birch.
I'm a no vote on this. It's a little disingenuous. If the sponsors of this had really supported getting rid of the IM program when we tried to get rid of it 3 years ago, we wouldn't have been contending with it right now. But I think we built a budget on the revenues that are forecast. We do have an economic statement. This is a bad idea, and like I say, it's been a long time coming. It should have happened 3 years ago. Thank you.
Seeing no one else in queue, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
No.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
That item failed 4-7. With that, I'm going to declare a recess for dinner, and I think for those in the audience, we should get out of here fairly quickly after we get back in a half an hour.
I'm still on. I'll just call you back. What time? Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Order. We are now at 14G on the agenda. This is AR 36. It's a resolution approving the letter of agreement between the Municipality of Anchorage and the Anchorage Municipal Employees Association regarding implementation of the Kronos and the SAP operating systems, plus various administrative issues accompanied by AM 100. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to us on this matter? Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, Madam Chair, on future ordinances of this ilk, could we please refer to it as SAP?
Pardon me. It does sound better than SAP.
That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder, Mr. Flynn. I will try my best. All right. Seeing no other discussion, please vote. Mr. Trombley? Yes. Mr. Trainee? And who do we have here? Okay, that's approved 9-0. The next item before us is 14H. This is AR 37. It's a resolution approving the letter of agreement between the Municipality of Anchorage and the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 302 regarding the 2012 and 2013 wage reopener, as well as implementation of the Kronos and the SAP operating system, accompanied by AM 101. Anybody who'd like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Trainee? Yes. Mr. Trombley? Yes. And that item is approved 9-0. The next item before us is 14I, AR 38. It's a resolution approving a letter of agreement between the Municipality of Anchorage and the Anchorage Police Department Employee Association with regard to performance pay field training officer point. And that's accompanied by AM 102. Would anybody like to speak to us on this? Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Second.
Is there discussion? Seeing none? Oh, Mr. Trombley, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I apologize. This question I heard, I just had to think about it. What was the requirement prior to this? Because field training officer was supposed to serve in that function for at least 20 hours during the qualification period. Is this something that's brand new, or is this a protocol now?
Mr. Vacalis, did you hear the question, sir? All right, the question basically is, what's the change in current practice? Do we know?
We have somebody here from...
oh, there he is,
yeah.
on the wrong, I looked the wrong direction.
Chief can answer it?
Chief Mew is going to answer your question, Mr. Trombley.
Mr. Trombley, through the chair, the Performance Point program is relatively new to the APD, and as we try to implement it, we're finding places in the contract that are vague. There was management had an idea of how many hours a field training officer should work before they achieve the point. The association had a different concept. We were headed for arbitration, and then we avoided arbitration by coming to a mutual agreement that was between the two expectations. And that's where we are. I think everybody's happy with it.
Mr. Trombley? All right. Is there anybody else who has any comment? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes, ma'am.
And that item is approved 10-0. The next item before us is 14J, or 40. It's a resolution approving an alcohol beverage conditional use for a package store on license number 5114 in the I-1 district for Prenellis LLC, DBA Winter Dreams at 2300 East 88th. Anybody like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Second.
Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
That item is approved 10-0. Ms. Drummond is out of the room. The next item before us is 14K. This is AR 18. It's a resolution of the Assembly revising the 2012 general government operating budget by appropriating $134,230 from the area-wide general fund balance to the Department of the Assembly to cover the costs of the 2011 Independent Financial System Audit, accompanied by AM 63. If there's anyone who'd like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed.
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ms. Johnston. Ms. Gray Jackson is first.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to thank my colleagues, the ones who wrote and had questions, and also the clerk who provided some comments before the meeting. It was really, really helpful. But I just want to take a moment and just talk about why I even brought this resolution forward, okay? First off, the 2012 approved budget included a line item for the municipal audit in an amount of $204,650, okay? That's the first thing. And then the general government portion that we approved when we approved the contract through AM 721-2011A is $338,876. Frankly, folks, the Assembly, we're responsible when we approve contracts to make sure that the money is there to pay our bills. If you look at the clerk's budget, okay, and you break it down, there is a line item and there's a total for, it's like 300 and whatever the amount is, I didn't write that number down. But anyway, and if you break down the professional service budget, there is $25,240, which doesn't have any description, and I suspect it's for the closed caption contract, because I couldn't find that contract money anywhere else. And then there's $204,650 with a description, municipal audit, $7,500 remaining from the 2010 first quarter budget revision for an ICER study, and then $96,610 with the description, 2012 Assembly Chamber upgrade. And based on the numbers that I saw in the descriptions, I was led to believe that this appropriation that I'm bringing forward this evening is in order, and that's why it's here. But the bottom line is this, folks, and I need to ask Mr. Ahern a question when I'm done. But if there's no planned assembly upgrades for 2012 and no plans for another ICER study, and the $13,000 that the clerk informed me that was paid last year, then the amendment should be revised to read $19,120. But I would like to hear from Mr. Ahern if, that amount that's budgeted, the $94,000 that's budgeted in the Assembly budget with the description 2012 Assembly Chamber upgrades is going to happen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Through the Chair. The $94,000 line item in the budget is in the budget for the clerk's office. So I'm not responsible for those entries. I'm not sure how that was prepared.
Right. My question to you is not whether or not you're responsible for the entries. My question is, because I believe it's through the IT department, are there any plans to do any upgrades within this chamber? Right. That's the question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So there is a contract in place with the Chariot Group, and that contract includes both assessment work and then work that would come based out of the assessment. My understanding is that the initial $20,000 approximately has been funded to perform some of the assessment work. I'm not aware that there are any other source of funds that have been identified yet, but as those become available, they can be plugged into the contract to actually either complete additional assessment work or actually perform work under that contract, yes.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, just one more comment. But my role as chair of the Municipal Audit Committee, it's my responsibility, and part of the committee's responsibility is to oversee the audit. And part of that overseeing the audit is to make sure that the funds are there to pay for the audit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Elvie Jackson, are you planning to amend this for the other amount, or what are your intentions? Because that would depend on what I'm...
Okay, Ms. Johnson, what I plan to do is to ask this body to prove an appropriation that takes care of the amount of money that we need to pay our audit. And so, what I just went through in terms of looking at the budget online, if what's online, and it is online, I have backup. Okay, if it's incorrect, then the administration needs to say that what I saw is incorrect and that the amount of money that we truly only need is $19,120. I don't want us to appropriate more money than we need. But I'll say something else because it's really important. The Assembly is responsible for making sure the audit's done. But it's an audit of the finances of the municipality of Anchorage, and the Assembly is not responsible for finding that money within their budget because, there wasn't enough budgeted. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, first of all, I'm not quite sure because I've heard varying degrees of how much money is needed, and my understanding we actually were fine as far as what we need for the audit. And I'd like to ask Ms. Mahoney if she feels that there needs to be any additional money, and then I'd still like to retain the floor after that.
It's my understanding that in the Assembly budget, there's $332,000 budgeted for professional services. The audit is expected to cost $338,000, which is a $6,000 delta. But I want to point out that $338,000, well, that is the Makunda, and the $332 is for everything. So I didn't prepare the budget for the Assembly, so I don't know if the $332 was intended to just cover the audit.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
If you'd like me to pass out the document that I printed from the budget prep system that confirms what I just said, I'm happy to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And that would be helpful. I guess I would like to ask the clerk, since the clerk and the chair actually did the budget for the Assembly, what is your understanding?
Through the chair, the $332,000 that we have is more than we need for the budget because the $338,000 is the total figure. We've paid $13,000 already. Those other figures, the ICER study and the chamber upgrades, were things that were in the budget last year that got in the budget prep system only, not in the budget itself, got carried over. But I talked to OMB this morning, and any cleanup that has to happen, we'll take that out at first quarter budget review.
So it is my suggestion that actually we postpone any action on this because it's like everything else that we deal as far as the first quarter budget revision, and I think we need to have a better handle on this. And since it's for such a small amount, I really even more strongly feel it's something, if it's needed, we will address it at first quarter budget revision. Thank you.
Mr. Hall.
I would like to share with the body the fact that Ms. Osander and I spent a significant amount of time working with the clerk as well as Jacqueline reviewing the budget, trying to make sure that we did have coverage and that our budget was adequate. And we both are comfortable that we've done that. We did that looking at it as the budget as a whole, and we're still working with alignment of some of the items that are in the budget. We'd like to get better clarification on that, but we're comfortable that when we finish working on this and had our budget presented, that we were covered on these expenses.
Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to spend too much more time on this, but folks, I wouldn't waste my time with this if I didn't know what I was talking about. And if this body wants to postpone action on this or dealing with this situation, that's fine, but I just thought it was important and prudent and my responsibility to bring this forward because I don't agree with what's being said, and I just passed a document down that confirms what I'm saying. And I think the one question that I would like to ask is, What's the $25,240 for? Is that the money for closed captioned? And if it isn't, where is the money for closed captioned? Because I didn't see it, not that that means it's not there. And then we can move on. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you want to answer this? Ms. Grinstein?
Yeah, through the chair, I don't know right from the top of my head, without looking at the numbers, where it is, but we'll find it and tell you tomorrow. Okay?
Seeing no one else in queue, please.
Make a motion
I'm
to
sorry?
postpone indefinitely?
Okay. Is that, if there's a second? There's a motion to postpone indefinitely. Seeing, I can't see my screen, but I'm assuming.
There's no second.
Yes, Ms. Johnston seconded it. Please vote on the motion to postpone indefinitely. Mr. Trainee? Mr. Trombley? Mr. Trombley, are you there?
Sorry, yes.
Are you voting yes?
Yeah, I'm voting yes.
The motion to postpone indefinitely passed 6-5. All right. At this point, then, we are now ready to deal with 14L, which is AR 28. It's a resolution appropriating $400,000 of federal seized and forfeited monies to the Federal State Fine and Forfeiture Fund for use by the Police Department. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to this matter? Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. Is there discussion? Mr. Honeman.
The chief still here. I read with interest, someone had contacted earlier. Is this, and maybe the administration will know, is this a different approach, based on what I'd read from earlier, is a different approach than we've not used for forfeiture funds in the past, Chief, by chance?
Mr. Honeman, through the chair, no, this isn't different from what we usually do. We've done this sort of thing. In fact, this is mostly what we do with this money.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Ms. Johnston was yes. So that passes unanimously. The next item before us is 14M. This is AR 30. It's a resolution appropriating $80,000 from the 2011 HLB operating budget and $80,000 from 2012 HLB.
Waive reading.
Basically for annual payments to the state of Alaska for the purchase of real property with a 5-year land sale agreement. This is a Porcupine property that was referred to by Mr. Flynn earlier. So if anybody would like to speak to this, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Second.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
That item is approved 10-1. The next item before us, let's see, is 14N. This is AR 39. It's a resolution appropriating $211,667 to the Airwide General Fund Department of Law for legal expenses. This is for repayment of a portion of a debt owed from the Alaska Center for the Performing Arts legal settlement. If anybody would like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing, seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve. Or second.
Mr. Starr?
I guess, Ms. Mahoney, will this have an impact on the ticket surcharge long-range plans here? Are we going to shorten the time frame on the surcharge required to pay back the loan?
No.
Okay, when will the surcharge end then? Do you have that information still?
The surcharge will end in 2035, and that's assuming that revenues equal expense in that debt account. But what this represents is the loan that the MOA made to the Performing Arts Center back in the 80s. And so there was $500,000 left that was to be paid off after the surcharge paid off the roof debt. And so essentially what this does is it relieves the PAC of that debt back out into future years. So essentially it does, in the year 2035, save the surcharge to PAC users.
Will there be a positive balance in the account after 2035, or will it just be revenue neutral by then?
It should be revenue neutral.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else, Mr. Traney, was that you?
No, it wasn't me. No, Trombley.
Oh, Mr. Trombley, you have a question?
Yeah, Madam Chair, my question would be to the administration. When was this case heard? Because the legal settlement was relating to the faulty insulation from 1988, and we're now appropriating this money to the at least $211,667 to the Department of Law for the legal services. When was this case heard? And yeah, just when was this case heard?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Trombley, it's not exactly that there was a case heard in this particular instance. There was a class action filed nationwide regarding this insulation material. However, there are at least 40 facilities nationwide that were not included in the class because they had custom installations. Ours was one of those. So the outside firm has been involved in a protracted process of developing all the evidence and handling the class action, as well as representing our interests as one of the 40 external claimants. And the class action was resolved here fairly recently. The vendor, Beazer, was shutting down their claims office, and this was the last opportunity for claimants to settle the cases or attempt to litigate. Our outside counsel advised us this was in fact, in their opinion, the best we were going to do, that the costs of protracted litigation and the potential for a good outcome were uncertain at best.
Mr. Trombley, anything else?
No, I figured since 1988, it's obviously taken a long time. I was just curious why we were spending the money now, but it sounds like it all just finally came and completed, so that answers the question. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler.
Seeing no one else, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Traney?
Yes.
That item passes unanimously. We're now at 14-0. This is AR 42. It's a resolution appropriating $13,168,350 from the United States pursuant to the State Small Business Credit Initiative Act of 2010. If you'd like to speak to us on this, please come forward.
Through the chair. I'm here to speak as a personal private citizen, not as a member of the Assembly. My name is Lance Ahern, A-H-E-R-N. I'm here to speak in support of this. I attended the Assembly work session last week, and I believe there were about 30 members of the technology business community who were there in support also. From my own personal experience, when I started my first company, there were 3 investors, myself, Visa, and MasterCard. And that's pretty common for small startups. You're pretty heavily invested, and I think many people in the room are pretty aware of that. We were, in the almost 4 years that I was at Internet Alaska, we were not able to ever get any bank loans, even though at the time I left, we were probably a $6 million a year revenue company with 75 employees. We relied on vendor financing, lease financing for all of our equipment, usually under pretty difficult terms. And then when I left to start my second company, which was called Fort Knox, we had the same basic issues. We were not able to get any bank loans. We relied on lease financing from companies outside. we were trying to make that as, build it as a local company, working to find local angel investors, which we were not able to do. In fact, after we moved the company to California, we became part of Panasonic's incubator in California, and we had Silicon Valley investors. At that point, we got our first round of Anchorage investors, which was really painful for me because the whole point of the company was to build an Alaskan company and stay in Alaska. So I think I think I've kind of made my point. I think this program is really good. I think the opportunity to build local businesses, support local businesses, keep them here, and support this particular sector of the economy and grow it locally is beneficial to Anchorage. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman has a question.
Well, and a comment, and thank you for, I know that you've been successful in private business and taking your talents to help work both at the state level and now at the municipality. Mr. Ahern, when you, I guess would ask you as a small business person who started up, do you see a value perhaps in the community of a small business resource center, a small business mentoring, I guess?
There are a number of programs locally available when you look at SBA and, a lot of different kind of federal programs. I know there are a number of groups now that are actively developing local technology incubators. And I know the world is much bigger than technology. That just happens to be the piece I see and know pretty well. So there's definitely a place. There are actually a couple of different, again, local technology incubators being built right now that I'm aware of. Hopefully, as long as one is successful, we'll be just fine.
And I guess back to the question is, I realize you're talking technology, but I'm talking about just business side of it. I mean, you might know technology and you do very well, but that doesn't necessarily mean the business side of it. Would that be, or have been helpful for starting up a business, having that mentoring from someone who's already done it before, or a resource center where you could go and say, I don't know how to do my payroll, I really don't know the best way to do accounting, or ordering. I mean, technology, you can put a computer in front of you, but...
I do think that there are a lot of resources available in the community. They may not all be in one place, but, there are a few resources that have been out there for quite a while. But in terms of this kind of an angel fund that really works closely with the investment community to support local businesses, that's something we don't have and really haven't had here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to testify?
My name is Alan Johnston, and I'm Chief Encouragement Officer of the Entrepreneurs and Mentors Network, proudly. There's a groundswell of support happening for entrepreneurship in Alaska that's been culminating 20 years of effort from a lot of people, particularly folks like Lance. This weekend there was the Startup Weekend, the very first one ever in Alaska, which is sponsored by the Kauffman Foundation. 32 people, you've probably seen it on the news. You talk about peer-to-peer learning, it was just fantastic to feel the stuff that's going on. The Angel Fund is interesting. It's the only city in the country right now that actually qualified to make it happen. But it's small and compared to some of the other things. Representative Mia Costello has a bill in right now. It's House Bill 252. It'll be Labor and Commerce next week. She needs to get looking for additional support from folks, so if people would send things on letterhead if they're interested in it. But it's a special bill. It's for qualifying small businesses, less than $50 million, for exempting them from state taxation. It parallels a federal bill that's out there right now, the Kauffman Foundation, Startup America. It exempts all capital gains tax if you invest in these types of companies, if you hold them for 5 years. Alaska will be the most competitive place in the United States for these qualifying small businesses. And that piggybacks with the Angel Fund and all these other things that are going on. So Alaska's in a phenomenal spot to really take advantage of these things. And I'm so excited, I'm not sure which way to turn. And as of 2:30 tomorrow at AEDC, we have another follow-up meeting with the Federal Reserve of San Francisco, Craig Nolte, on the incubators. That's a big passion that he wants to help us get the incubator going up here. We've been working on it for several years. And there's a lot of things coming together on that as well. And I very much support as far as the municipality accepting it's a tiny part in an overall puzzle, but it's a can-do mentality. If you think you're going to fail, you will fail. If you think you're going to succeed, you can succeed. But you got to have the mentality that you can succeed. And I should have used my 3 minutes by now.
Well, you have a question. Mr. Honeman.
Mr. Johnson, thanks for all your support and enthusiasm. I had a brief conversation with you after the work session. The same question earlier, and I'm probably pitching this right to you as a softball, but I know you do mentoring and coaching. Is there a benefit, or would there be a benefit of the local government helping to set up, I think you say the incubator, I'm envisioning something similar, mentoring, small business mentoring, and I guess small business resource center for people who, they might be good at a task or making pizzas is their passion, but they don't necessarily know how to do payroll or, the operations end of it or covering capital and things like that.
The most effective way is for the municipality to support it, not to play lead. There's more than enough critical mass right now. If the the nonprofits or the folks that are involved in economic development are actually sharing information and people are working together. One of the ideas on the necessity of the angel fund is you're creating active local investors who are investing in somebody else's business they don't control. You're looking for folks that have been there, done that experience. There's 300 folks that are College of Fellows, almost every one of them. A College of Fellow is somebody pays $1,000 a year to be like University of Alaska. APU is the Denali Society. All these folks believe that the university is very important to the community. I'd say almost every one of them is interested in actually being an angel investor, but they don't know how. Every one of those folks can be involved in mentoring a student. And they're interested in living legacies. You're not just something that's stale, giving $1,000 away. Those people are out there, and we are at a point right now to take advantage of that. It just changed the essence of the community significantly. Churches, schools, everything.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. No more questions.
Sorry about the water hose, Jennifer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Bill Popp, President and CEO of the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation, and I'm here to represent our organization tonight speaking in support of this resolution. As Alan has so eloquently put, angel capital and in particular venture capital is very difficult to find in Alaska. We're a very immature area for that type of investment. This particular fund is an important small step forward towards providing that kind of element that is currently missing in our state. Our organization has worked with several different project proposals over the last several years. We have worked with local companies that have interest in investing in new ideas, in new venture. We have had some success in terms of some initial startup, but we've not had the success that we would like to see in terms of getting a more robust type of venture capital investment program going up here. And so we see this program as an opportunity to be able to help facilitate a more aggressive stance in terms of getting local entrepreneurs as well as those from outside of Alaska who are looking to invest in the region. We work with a lot of different companies on that front too. And this could be a very important element in signaling Anchorage and Alaska's intent to help support more aggressively business investment in the region. So we support the concept and we support the resolution that's being put forth tonight.
Thank you, sir. There appear to be no
Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Tromley, go ahead.
I have a question for Mr. Popp.
Go ahead.
I appreciate you coming down. My question for you is that if a business, what is it about this government program that will spur economic development? And the reason I ask that is that if an idea is so good, why wouldn't a normal investor without this program already invest in a business or in an idea? What is it about this government program that makes it so much better than what's already out there?
Through the chair, Mr. Trombley, I'll do my best to answer that question. The idea of this fund fits in filling a role that the private sector has not been willing to take on,
to any significant degree. There have been several attempts to establish angel funds and venture capital efforts here in Alaska. There are a few successes. The Truly vodka line was put together recently with some very creative efforts to put in venture capital, but it was a very small amount. This is on a larger scale. Should government be doing this? I think that's in the eye of the beholder. I think that from our point of view as an organization and speaking to my board of directors, with the lack of the private sector stepping up, this small amount of effort could leverage some significant new interest by reducing the risk factor just a little bit for the private sector to invest. And I want to remind the Assembly that this is not fully funding any proposals that would be coming forward to it. In fact, it would be less than 10% of the overall funding. Another 10% has to step up from the private sector, or 10 times the amount has to step up from the private sector. And if the private sector doesn't believe in the project, then they're not going to be qualifying in the first place.
Would it be fair to say that the private sector does things because they see a benefit in that, meaning that they see a profit that can be made from an idea? Mm-hmm. Would it be fair to say that since we haven't seen that investment in Alaska, that there may not be the profit or the return on investment that would warrant the initial investment or the angel fund? And I guess government doesn't concern itself with making a profit. The private sector does, and my concern is that when we have this program that people won't say, oh, well, it's free money, that they're somehow going to extend themselves and that they're being set up for failure. Do you see that as a possibility?
Well, there are a lot of questions in that. I'll do my best to remember them from start to finish. I think, first of all, you have a clear example of how government gets involved in incentivizing investment from the private sector, and Alaska has a long history with this, and that's in the incentives and in the programs that we put in place to incentivize activities in the oil and gas patch. So this is on a much, much smaller scale in terms of the dollar amounts that are currently being debated in Juneau. So I think that this does have a place, although on a much smaller scale in terms of the broader government, or in the broader economy, excuse me. And I apologize, the second part of your question?
The second part of my question is that are we possibly setting ourselves up for failure because we're creating something that the private sector hasn't been willing to invest in? Meaning that if the risk is lowered, are we setting ourselves up for failure?
Well, I guess it would be the measure.
Because we're lowering the risk with federal dollars.
My apologies for not letting you finish. Through the chair, the risk of failure is the funds don't get spent. It may be setting up an expectation in the public, but in terms of a liability to the municipality, nobody qualifies for the funds, which I think is the point of your question. If they can't gather the private sector capital together on the project, then the money doesn't get spent. So if you're looking at a pure risk perspective, that's the risk that the municipality takes on in taking this program.
Okay. That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Pop.
Mr. Honeman has a question.
Mr. Pop, thank you. I guess since I'll be consistent here, asking the same question I had. A Small Business Resource Center or mentoring program, is it AEDC? Is there a component in AEDC for either of those types of programs?
We triage proposals that come our way. We get a lot of them that are in the startup mode. We get some really great ideas that have absolutely no business sense backing them in terms of expertise in accounting, in expertise in finance, and expertise in just running a business. Then we assess that situation, we introduce them and move them over to the Small Business Development Center, which is an adjunct of the University of Alaska, or we get them involved with the Center for Economic Development at the university or over at UAA. Or, depending on the project, if they really need some very significant TLC, there's one project that we're working on right now in the healthcare field that really needs a lot of really direct help and expertise that's got a lot of oomph over at Alaska Pacific University. We've been helping to facilitate an agreement between APU and this particular business venture to get them the mentoring and the direct relationships, and quite honestly, some knowledge transfer opportunities that may come out of that will generate a potential opportunity for the university to benefit greatly as a minority owner in this project, if that is the ultimate agreement that results, or some form of return on investment for their time and effort. When it comes to the smaller businesses, there's a lot of resources out there, but there's never enough, because there's a lot of people with a lot of great ideas. I think it's a question of, diminishing returns when you get too much going on out there. The Alaska Manufacturing Extension Partnership is an organization that we've helped with a couple of projects that we've sent their way. We do take on a couple of projects like the one that I just mentioned in the healthcare side of things, that we feel specifically we have the tools to help facilitate their advancement.
And then I guess just a quick follow-up. Going back to what Mr. Tromley was asking, there's really no sure thing in business anyway. I mean, isn't it the old edict that if you can last about 5 years in business, you have a better chance of making it in the long term?
Well, for this particular program, I would say that the difference that you need to keep in mind is that this program, as I understand it, I'm still, obviously learning as you are in terms of as Ms. Mahoney pulls together the guidelines and the specifications for the program. But this program is oriented around existing businesses, as I understand it. So these are the businesses that are more focused on being an existing entity that's looking to expand or has a new venture. Now, I'm hoping I've got that right. I unfortunately was not able to attend the work session last Friday, so I would defer to Ms. Mahoney if I've got that wrong.
I would like to say that it addresses both existing businesses that need capital for growth as well as new startups.
I thought that's what I understood too.
Okay,
So thanks.
and my apologies. That was a nuance that in the very short period of time we're still trying to keep up with this. There's no sure thing in business. When you deal with startups, we refer to the first 5 years on a startup as the valley of death, where good ideas go to die. And we do our best to help them through that, but most businesses fail in that first 5-year period. It's part of the creative, destructive process that capitalism is all about.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there anyone else who'd like to testify?
Hello, my name is Jeremiah Stephen, S-T-E-P-H-E-N. I'd like to testify on behalf of this project. I attended the Friday work session, and being a part of a incubator mentoring type of program that does exist here in Anchorage, I'm finding a lot of value in the resources that we are beginning to attain here. I own a business that was created and originated in Fairbanks, and it has been going since 1991. My wife and I run this business, and it is becoming very successful. With this opportunity that does sit before us, we do have the potential to reach out on a national level, and that could mean more jobs here, bringing revenues back to Alaska, utilizing resources in the rural areas as part of our business model. And that's one of the things I'm looking at doing with this incubator, with partnering with UAA, and about many other opportunities that are coming around. So I look forward to this opportunity and taking advantage of it and being a part of it, as well as being an Alaska Native and giving back to and training and encouraging other Alaska Natives with this fund as a mentor, as a leader, and as a dad and a husband. So I look forward to you guys' support, and if you have any questions.
Mr. Honeman does.
You mind sharing your business name? I'm curious.
Tim Watch.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Good. Congrats. It's 91, I understand?
We bought the business in 2003,
okay.
And we've been running it ever since then. And my wife is texting me some questions, so.
Go ahead. She's got a question? Go ahead.
No, it's my daughter.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, congratulations on a well-run business, apparently. And we just talked about that first 5 years being pretty tough. I'm sure it was.
It's not easy being in Alaska. There's not a lot of resources, but with the help of Alan Johnston and some of the team that we have around us, it's becoming more profitable. It's becoming more doable versus going out of Alaska and bringing those resources back or trying to attain those resources outside Alaska, which there are many of, which I'm sure you're aware of. So having that access locally and being able to be in the state where I grew up and am from, it makes a big difference.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Anyone else would like to testify on this matter? Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed. Ms. Johnston?
We're going to do the motion first. Move to approve.
Second.
All right, the matter is before us. Now, Ms. Johnston.
I just want to mention that I might have a conflict in this. The water hose, fire hose, Alan Johnston is my husband, and he actually was the person that saw the opportunity and brought it to the municipality and has been volunteering and working on this. So there is a direct interest in this, and I just felt I should mention that.
Ms. Johnston, do you have any kind of financial involvement or gain if we vote to approve this matter?
At this point, I would say we do not. I know that, Alan is actively involved in a virtual incubator that he started and is developing an incubator and an angel fund. I don't think he'll be using this, but I would never know. Never say never 10 years from now.
Does your husband's income significantly going to improve if we approve this contract?
No, he spent a lot of money doing this. No. In fact, I think it's gone very much on the expense side.
All right. Well, at this point, I don't think anybody on the Assembly should be disinclined from volunteering their efforts to improve our community. So I'm going to rule you do not have a conflict, but I do thank you for bringing this to our attention. Do you have any other comments you wanted to make, Ms. Johnston?
No, thank you.
Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a person that's been a small businessman for 45 years and honestly struggled most of those 45, it seems like you work 10 to get one good. I will definitely be supporting this. What I hope, Mr. Mayor, is that we can really take and do this right. We all have frustrations with trying to get loans from banks these days, but the reality is the federal government's got so many regulations in place that there are loans that banks would love to make that they're just absolutely prohibited from doing. And a story that I would share, and what I'd love to see is in this investment committee, I wish we would be able to find some bankers from Frank Reed's era. I'll share with you a story. A good friend of mine moved up here 40 years ago with a major international company. In order to really get into the local business, they partnered with local firms, went to First National Bank, met with Mr. Cuddy about financing a project that they wanted to do, and he said he will never forget it. He walked into that meeting and had his colored brochures, a 20-page financial statement, and just thought he would walk in and blow this local bank away. And he'll never forget because Mr. Cuddy looked at it for a couple of minutes and laid it down on the desk, and he said, he literally told me, he said, we're going to do this deal, but we're going to do it because I know him, the man that was local, and I don't know you, and I trust him. I think that's a lot of what has to go into this, is people that have that gut instinct when they sit down and they interview and they talk to people to understand if they are truly entrepreneurs that don't know the meaning of the word failure and are willing to put in whatever it takes to be able to make a project work. And sometimes it only takes a small amount of money to make a huge difference in someone succeeding and failing. So let's use that Frank Reed approach about let's find a way to do this when we're working this. And a couple, actually 3 names I would share when we're all talking about if these people have something that's really going to work, why can't they get a loan from a bank? And I would share with you Henry Ford, Steve Jobs, and Bill Gates, all people that come to be multi-million billionaires, that when they came and had an idea, there was nobody that would loan them money to get it off the ground. And I have no doubt that we've got individuals in this community that may have the ability and the capability to fall in those categories, but they need some little something to help them get started. So I just hope that we do it right. I understand we've got some parameters attached with this allocation already, and but let's try to take this and really make a difference in what the future of this community could look like, starting with this $13 million.
Mr. Honeman.
I think Mr. Hall summed it up pretty well. I agree with probably 99.9% of everything he said. I do believe that we can take the process. First of all, I'll be a yes vote. I think it's a great set of capital, for venture capital. I think it's a great use of the monies, and it's what we applied for. And thanks to Mr. Johnston for getting involved and at your expense to do a lot of the legwork to get us to this point. I am just a little concerned that we may get it right, and I think I share Mr. Hall. I think there's some improvements can be made on our process, but it's all in draft form, so it remains to be seen, and I'm going to be watching and perhaps adding some comments as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be real brief. I was concerned on Friday that we were maybe overthinking this. One of the hallmarks of entrepreneurials is the ready, shoot, aim form of business, also known as smoking holsters. And this is an opportunity to encourage those folks to go out and do things most of us wouldn't have the courage to do and make a difference in ways we wouldn't. And I'm excited about it. I have a lot of faith in Ms. Mahoney and her ability to execute this program. And I'm sure she'll be telling us all the details we ever want to know. But please, folks, don't overthink this. Don't make it messy. Let's keep it simple, and let's make a difference.
Seeing no one else in queue, please vote. Mr. Traney?
Yes.
Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
That passes unanimously. Keep us in the news on this one, or in the loop, as I guess is the best way to say it. Thank you. Not the news. Thank you. All right. With that, we have completed our agenda. And we are now, is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak to us on a matter that is not on our agenda?
Yay.
Welcome back.
Hi, happy Tuesday and happy Valentine's Day. I also wanted to tell you guys that today is the start of some kids from Occupy Wall Street doing this really cool thing called Revolutionary Games in Bedworth, kind of based off of John Lennon and Yoko Ono's bet-in against the Vietnam War. So I think all of you guys have a Valentine, and something that we've been wondering is, any of you guys are interested in it? I think we'd all really appreciate having an ordinance or resolution passed in favor of overturning the Citizens United versus Federal Election Committee 2010 trial that allowed corporations to have unlimited funds in our elections. This kind of makes corporate personhood legal in our country. And as far as I'm concerned, when corporations were first utilized, they had specific purposes and end dates. Then as time went on, corporations kind of became these machines that would just keep going. And, you know, that's cool. You know, I support local business. Some of these other businesses, I think, that have grown and grown to become super large and eating lots of smaller businesses have become these merged monopolies. But the fact that they can have unlimited funding in our political campaigns takes away our rights for free speech, because as much as the Supreme Court now thinks that money can be considered speech, I believe that goes against our Constitution and our First Amendment rights. However, you know, if money is speech, then I feel speech might be money. So if you guys are going to allow us to pay our taxes this year in speech, you know, maybe you guys can support the continuation of this Supreme Court decision. However, it'd be really great. Some other municipalities and cities are doing local ordinances and resolutions to show support for the Constitution and our freedom for speech in this country that our forefathers gave us. So if any of you guys are interested in that, I'm probably going to be sending you guys an email as well, just to give you some more information about this group, Move to Amend. And I hope that you will consider trying to support free speech here in Anchorage and across the United States. And happy Valentine's Day.
And we need your name for the record.
My name is Tina Robinson.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to us on a non-agenda item? Hearing and seeing no one, or assembly comments?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Madam Chair,
Wait,
I think I weighed in to speak, if I
I'm
could.
sorry, you were in the queue. I didn't see you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to note, item 14H today was a letter of agreement between the municipality and Local 302, and Jason Allward, the district representative, and some of his members are here, and wanted to thank them for all their hard work, but more so thank them for all the hard work they're doing out on the streets of Anchorage. We've been getting lots of calls about the snow plowing. These guys have been at it 24/7. We've had almost, by the time we're done, it'll be the all-time record snow for Anchorage, and quite a challenge, and they've been out there meeting that challenge, so I thank you guys.
Thank you.
Madam
Thank
Chair?
you very much.
I agree. I forgot, I was going to bring up kind of a point to Ms. Johnston. I suppose it's appropriate from an earlier comment. I'm actually a member of Anchorage Police and Fire Retirement, and I've talked to several people. I know Derek Shore wasn't here. They have contact with the retirees, and I can most assure you that there are a lot of folks that are concerned about the defined contribution plan in retirement versus defined benefit, and I believe they would be more than happy to entertain reopening the plan for new members. And, that's, I guess we're having conflicting comments, so I just wanted to point that out. For one, I would be more than willing to see a reasonable way of doing it. So,
All right, we
Thank
did have a motion for adjournment, and I'm going to, at this time, adjourn us.